Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, April 14th, 2025. I checked it out, by the way. The Ides of April are on the 13th. Yesterday was the Ides of April. You were supposed to be aware of that, probably. I guess it's a big one after the Ides of March. The next Ides to come up, anyway. And, well, it was the weekend, so we were away. Much happening, of course. The weekend is always time to catch up on, well, what sporadic change of direction we might have been commanded to take by the alleged commander-in-chief on his way back from a golf outing. Any number of things that, that could have happened. And it was a weekend full of whiplash. He didn't leave early, but it does seem like it. It seemed like a longer weekend than usual. But at any rate, the tariffs have gone back and forth over the weekend. I guess you could say now as expected. We now expect the tariffs to be unpredictable and for, the unforeseen circumstances to turn on their heads. Let's see, I believe when he left for the weekend, we were still at, okay, we're going to have giant high tariffs on China, but maybe on no one else. And then we were trying to debate why it was that it was being covered as a suspension or a pause in the tariffs, when in fact they were being paused, quote unquote, for the most of the world at levels much higher than they were at before the Trump presidency. So who knows? I guess more press stenography. We're also going to have, I want to report ahead of time. It sounds like lawn care management day outside of the studio as well. So all the fun trimmers and leaf blowers and whatnot are out and roaring, and the bird feeders are mostly empty. So there might be some complaining birds right outside the window as well. So we'll try and work them into the show the best we can. Tariff-wise, though, yeah, we left off with we were going to have gigantic tariffs still on China, and in fact, they were going to get even higher, whereas everyone else, instead of doing 25% tariffs up from about zero, they were going to go to 10%. So they were going to be historically high and yet paused at the same time. So that was a little bit puzzling. Then, I don't know, let's see. I don't even know the chronology of it, but I believe the tariffs on China went up a little bit more even, and then on his way out the door, there was this sudden pronouncement that, well, all the very important, very expensive sorts of things that we actually get from China that very rich companies import, and that on Thursday we were saying we would all just have to learn to make in the United States, even though, let's see, Howard Lutnick was happily pronouncing that everybody was going to have to learn to turn little tiny screws and make iPhones here in the United States. Then the president had an event at which he said, nobody wants to turn screws and make little iPhones. That's terrible. We should all be coal miners, up, down, backwards, forwards. Anyway, apparently word comes down that, oh, no, all the things that you were worried about importing from China, we're actually going to suspend the tariffs on those too. Also probably maybe for 90 days, which is definitely not a period of time that we've ever been considering. We denied that all week long, said it was fake news when anybody brought it up, and then here it is. Now, I believe Saturday most of the world spent adjusting to the whiplash of finding out, okay, well, maybe the tariffs on smartphones and computers and computer chips, and it's very confusing and stupid and not planned at all. And certain things are, if they're green, they got 100% tariff. If they're blue, they got 15% tariff. It's very stupid. But then, I guess in preparation for the flight home, wanting to confuse everybody and keep them in suspense, there was another announcement that actually maybe some of those suspensions of the tariffs weren't really true, or some of the timelines were different, or maybe half of the things, or if you were standing on your head, you wouldn't have to pay a tariff. So no one knows what's going on. Watching the economists suffer with this, I did see somebody sort of succinctly put it together. I've grown used to not knowing what tariffs are going to be in the future. It's not knowing what they are in the present that's really bothering me. Anyway, many other things happened as well, and several of them are terrible. Greg Dworkin is out and about and collecting them. I want to work my way through methodically through the various fanfares available to us for free without violating any. I don't know. I'm gonna have to keep track of which ones I've done already. This one is called. Well, who cares what it's called? But it'll all come. We'll give a plug to Upbeat with 2 P's for some reason. UPPBEAT. Upbeat.
The 3 is silent.
Yeah. .io. I don't think I know what IO is about. But anyway, they have royalty-free fanfare sound effects, so we could try this. All right, we may even have tried that one before or not.
Yeah, sounds kind of Elizabethan. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Well, trumpet fanfare, royal announcement. We'll try them all out. The one that I really like that I used on here at first did come from here. They have some wild ones.
Right. All right. So .io is a generic domain for tech companies and startups because it's cool because it sounds like input-output.
Yeah, I guess so. All right. But did they? Is it a country that sold it off? Was it ever supposed to be?
No, it's a separate country. I mean, the British Indian Ocean Territory, Biot, that has those big tariffs for our own military base, also uses IO.
Okay. Because I did know that, sometimes people who or countries that got assigned interesting sounding, I forget what they call it, domain something or others, and who were like, well, we don't have a whole lot of internet traffic or whatever going on in our country. Tuvalu, right? And they got .tv, and I want that for streaming my shows. And they were able to auction those things off and make a bit of money. So I wondered whether IO landed any money in any offshore account somewhere. But okay, not important. Whereas other things that you've collected probably of more pressing concern to people.
Well, we have a list.
But this is important. I like to know what the hell we're doing. Right. Okay. So the weekend, it was crazy.
Yeah. Let's just finish up talking a little bit about the economy since you brought it up.
What even is that?
Because it's the number one issue on most people's radar.
Oh, yeah,
and Trump continues to tank
table.
In terms of people's opinion of how he's doing with the economy.
Okay.
The interesting thing is that Wall Street types are starting to speak out about it. This is the Bridgewater founder, very conservative guy. We're at a decision-making point and very close to a recession, he says. Ray Dalio, who's, I think, dabbled in thinking about running as a Republican, of course. But he's expressed concern, just so you know. Jamie Dimon from J.P. Morgan's also spoken up, so there's a few. This is CNBC. Trump's ongoing 25% auto tariffs expected to cut sales by millions, cost $100 billion. I mentioned that specifically because Mike Rogers, ex-congressman, is now declaring that he's going to run for the Gary Peters open slot Senate seat as a Republican. And his announcement this morning says, President Trump needs strong allies in the Senate to help him deliver on the mandate given by the American people. That means bringing manufacturing jobs back to Michigan, protecting senior Social Security, lowering the cost of gas, groceries, and prescription drugs, and setting our kids up for success by improving education. So you look at that and you go, okay, it's opposite day. Everything that Rogers claims that Trump is doing, and he's like number one, all in, joined at the hip with Trump. A1. I think that's going to doom his campaign, frankly, because people understand that manufacturing jobs are not coming back to Michigan, and auto workers are being laid off, and Social Security is threatened, and the gas, groceries, and prescription drug prices are going up. Gas may drop because the market falls out, but that's part of recession. And, Linda McMahon has that education, so that tells you everything you need to know about that. So I don't get it.
I don't know.
But he's running.
But, yeah, speaking of Linda McMahon and education, I did see, I don't know if I mentioned on Friday, but I did see it before the weekend, was that she was at a big, I don't know. I say big. I mean, there was video taken of this conference, and I saw
there were more than
so
3 people there.
Big. So they had a panel, and they were interviewing her, and da-da-da. So, but she took a moment to express that she wanted everybody to know that the future of education, we got to start teaching the kids about the computers early so that they learn how to deal with A1. The future is A1. All the computers are using A1, and they even talk to you, these A1 assistants.
Yeah.
And it was
And
very
I can't figure out how
clear
to use my 8-track either.
that she meant AI. And I just was, what I really was enjoying was watching the other panelists like, nod at
Squirm.
her. Yeah. Well, they were giving her the nod like, oh, yeah.
Yeah,
A1.
we're going to call it A1 from now on because
Right.
like she's, associated with the government and we do whatever the government's. Yeah,
Right.
stupid.
So
No,
my computer
no.
has Covfefe A1 in it. And now everybody has to say it that way.
So this Michigan race, will
Yes.
probably be interesting. It's Gary Peters' seat. He is not running for re-election.
Uh,
And on the Democratic side, the only
hmm.
declared candidate is Mallory McMorrow, who is a progressive favorite because she speaks out, which is exactly what's needed in this day and age. And if she's running against Mike Rogers, it'll be a clear choice.
Yes.
Whatever people decide, it will be a very clear choice.
Oh, all right.
People who have decided not to run include Pete Buttigieg, Debbie Dingell, people you've heard of, Gary Peters, of course, who stepped down,
Yeah.
Hillary Scholten, who's representative, Gretchen Whitmer, who's governor right now,
Covering her face.
Andy Levin, Rashida Tlaib. These people may run. People
Hmm.
who have expressed interest, including Dana Nessel, who's currently the Attorney General.
Right.
So, it'll be interesting on the Democratic side. On the Republican side, I assume Tudor Dixon will run again because she always runs. And,
I always love that
I don't know
name.
who else. I know that a whole bunch of other people have decided not to, including
Okay.
Tony Dungy,
Oh.
former head coach of the
Well,
Tampa Bay Buccaneers and all-around jerk.
yeah, it might be okay with me if he doesn't bother to run. Tudor, I always love that as a nickname. I think they should spell it with two
Yeah,
T's, but I enjoy it.
yeah, well,
All right. So who's
she's
running?
running.
Oh
She's
yeah.
running against Edwardian Jones.
All right. Worrisome contest to have to watch. Michigan is a nail
Also,
biter.
Henry VIII is the big whale there, but he hasn't decided whether or not to throw his hat in the ring. So we'll see what happens. But it should be an interesting race. Anyway,
Yes.
that's what's going on there. I just, Michigan, Detroit, cars. There's a lot going on there, and I don't understand why the Republicans are like wrapping their arms around Trump. I don't get it. I understand why they might
Mm.
have up till now. Yeah, this is a primary, but you're dooming yourself in the general election if you do that.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if they know anything else to do. I guess you got to test that out and then see how it goes.
Yeah, I suppose. Anyway, just sort of interesting there. There's a Trump acolyte named Bill Ackman who's really annoying on social
Yeah.
media. Who
Right.
finds he's billionaire hedge fund guy who's finding everything that Trump does to be just totally brilliant. I can't believe how brilliant. I can't believe I didn't think of this first,
Yeah.
kind of
You're
stuff.
briefly worried for a day or two at some
But
point
everybody
recently,
knows he's an idiot.
Hmm.
And the
Oh.
funny thing is, apparently somebody who's been annoyed at Bill Ackman for his entire career is Carl Icahn,
Oh.
who you may remember is a billionaire
icon.
investor as well.
Yeah.
So this is a piece. I'm not sure exactly where it's from. Just a copy of it. Carl Icahn, the veteran activist investor and a longtime adversary of Ackman's, told CNBC in a phone interview that he believes the Pershing Square CEO's tweets are yet another example of how wrong Ackman can be. His tweeting might be a positive. Since I've known him, he's never been correct about anything he said. Therefore,
Okay.
if one reads his tweets and does the opposite, you're almost sure to be correct and very possibly make a large profit, Icahn said. So,
All right.
I guess his investment
Oh.
ability matches his political acumen.
I guess so. I mean, I don't know.
At least according to Icahn.
He's been Ackman. I only know is
Icahn, who is an icon.
Yeah, but Ackman was the one who was so active in Harvard affairs and insistent on pushing out the presidents of the various universities and et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know. Then he hung around. But I guess if you have $1 billion, that happens. People continue to pay attention to you. But yeah, all right. For a while there, he was real scared that everything sucked and the tariffs were going to be horrific. And they haven't changed much, but now they're awesome somehow.
Yeah, something
That's
like
all it
that.
took.
And also it was brilliant. And this, my favorite, this was the plan all along.
Oh, yes, right. And
I mean, because when all else fails, this is the plan all along.
that definitely seems to be the fallback position of the administration, or people who were yesterday saying, I don't know what's going on, but this was the plan all along. Well, you should have looked at the plan.
It is so bad.
And you would have known.
Trump's economic plans, such as they are, if you can dignify them with that, are so bad that I'm afraid I have some bad news. He's lost Ross Douthat.
What? That's crazy.
This is a column from the 12th. Trump is on a path to failure.
Oh, well. Well, it's just a path.
And in May 2017, just a few months into the first Trump administration, I wrote a column arguing his incapacity was so obvious and destructive he should be removed.
When was that?
This was a popular column, but his argument didn't hold up well. Trump's first-term White House remained abnormally chaotic, but relative to the initial months, his presidency stabilized sufficiently that the claim of incapacity and the call for constitutional intervention didn't fit the facts.
What?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's Ross Douthat, you know. So basically, I dared to think for myself and then decided I really need to come back into the conservative fold and agree with everybody else. So we did that over time. There have been many moments like that for observers of the Trump phenomenon where they decided, I guess, in retrospect, gee, maybe it's not so bad, you know, which is one of the reasons I almost never read Douthat. I just can't stand this garbage.
Yeah, I would find this very frustrating.
Which is why when he returned to office, I vowed to avoid premature declarations of catastrophe. I would criticize, but I wouldn't act as though everything was irrecoverable for at least the first year. And this week has sorely tested that resolve. I mean, that's a stupid resolution to make.
Well, yeah.
You absolutely should break it. And I don't even know why you made it in the first place.
I mean, who would say the way I'm going to cover this 10-second news cycle president is I'll wait a year and see how it plays out?
Yeah, none of Trump's first-term policies carried the comprehensive risks involved in his great trade war, the threat of recession, the potential threat to America's global position, basic solvency, even with the suspension of the country-by-country tariffs, which aren't suspended, they're just lowered. The scale of the China trade war and the general uncertainty created by the Trump whipsaw pretend economic pain without a clear path, and that's a very bad place to be for a president who's always depended on good economic vibes, and it's happening against a backdrop of other wrong terms and disappointments. You know, he writes as if he has no knowledge whatsoever, writing for the New York Times, a New York-based paper, that Trump has been bankrupt at least 6 times that I know of, and that he's a crook and a mob boss. I mean, yeah, you have to ignore that sort of stuff and say, well, you know, the only people saying that are people who know him or who have worked with him. Therefore, I don't have to take it seriously.
Yeah, well, I don't know where he came from, like, originally, but I guess he was probably, 6 when Donald Trump was, going bankrupt all the time and was all over the New York newspapers. I don't think he's old enough to know. I don't think he's originally from New York.
Sure, nobody in a position that he has should do any research whatsoever or look things up.
Well, I didn't say that, but I meant it.
they'll bother your opinion, you know?
Yes. Well, right. He's just reacting to the moment. I didn't know that there was a whole history. This guy is, by the way, he's the oldest guy ever elected president. Why see whether he's done anything in his life?
Yeah, it's not like he has a record.
80 years under his belt. Should I check? No.
Douthat says I wrote in December about the need for a fruitful balance between Trump's populist and techno-libertarian factions. So you were already wrong.
But the need for a balance.
We need a balance between J.D. Vance and Elon Musk.
Right.
Let's take somebody who's awful and marry him with somebody who's awful and somehow balance the two. Do you know what you get when you do that? Something really awful.
I guess so. Whatever this is, we've got it.
Meanwhile, everything it does with a dose of tough guy excess, and that makes for a bad trajectory. And just because Trump has survived bad trajectories before doesn't mean he will this time. Okay, well, I'll agree with that.
It's not the reason that he'll
the rest
survive.
Is garbage, but basically that's what he wrote.
But it's a good bet.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, you can bet that he'll survive and win without having an explanation for it.
Right. Anyway, there's other stuff in the news. One of the big things that's been in the news is that a nutcase guy, a local though, broke into Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania's house while his kids, his family, and some guests were still there. Brought in some Molotov cocktails,
Cocktail hour,
gasoline that
that's
he
good.
took from a lawnmower and stuck in beer bottles, and set fire to
Huh.
the mansion.
The governor's mansion, not
Yeah, while
Shapiro's
Shapiro
private
was still there.
residence. Oh, well,
And,
I used to think
they
he'd get in
caught
trouble
him.
for that.
And the reason he caught him is an ex-girlfriend. He confessed to doing it, so he turned himself in. Um,
All right,
and he says he was angry with the governor and would have
I
beaten him
see.
with a hammer if confronted.
A hammer.
Yeah, well,
Hmm.
that's the Nancy Pelosi, Paul
Yeah,
Pelosi
so
thing,
that's the
It's
hot thing to
it's the
do,
new
I
hot
guess.
thing to do.
Hmm.
But he still didn't say why he was angry, so we don't know that. But he did do
Well,
an extensive amount of damage, and it
who
was on
cares?
Passover. And Shapiro is
Oh.
Jewish, and so it's being investigated as many things: arson, terrorism, and possibly a hate crime.
Well, you know what they do when they find out that he's around, well, 38. He's not campus age young, but a relatively young person speaking out forcefully in a way that could be interpreted as anti-Semitism. I guess he's going to El Salvador when this is all done. But what if he doesn't because he's white? Holy moly.
Mm.
Or they're just not
So,
serious about their worries about anti-Semitism. I think only certain anti-Semitism counts.
yeah, something like that.
Okay.
So that happened,
Yeah.
and I just thought you should know.
I did get wind of that, and it was interesting that I mean, it might just be a matter of how long it took to develop the facts, but the first couple hours post these reports, it made it sound like it was like that second, maybe sort of assassination attempt against Trump, that he was nearby, but nothing happened and he
Yeah,
didn't
right.
shoot. It sounded like, well, he
He was
tried to
nearby and he
light
had a
a
gun,
house
and
on
you're not
fire
supposed to,
with a
but
match, right? But no, and then they showed the pictures, like, no, it gutted the governor's mansion. It's wrecked.
yeah. So it's pretty bad.
Wow. Okay.
Also, the other thing that happened, I think that's pretty big news in addition to the economy, is the courts versus Trump. Things are sort of coming
Yeah.
to a head. So the Supreme Court said, look, you have to use due process. Due process isn't just a
We
thing,
love
it's
that.
not words. We can differ, we amongst us here in the judiciary, about which due process you should be using, habeas corpus or something else.
Mumbo
But the
jumbo.
fact is, you got to do something. You can't just pick people off the street and then throw them in a prison in El Salvador. So the lower courts are right in saying you can't do that.
Yeah.
Now, why don't you fix it?
Right.
So they sent it back to the lower court, and the lower court said, "You're not fixing it. I need information. I need an update, like basically every day, because you're not following through." And
Right.
Trump basically said, "Well, we're not going to tell you because,
Yeah.
like, it's a state secret."
Cool.
So this is how
Not
notice
really.
put it. The Supreme Court on Thursday ordered the Trump administration to facilitate the return of Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia, the Maryland legal resident mistakenly deported to El Salvador, upholding U.S. District Judge Paula Zina's lower court order. On its face, it seemed like a win for his supporters and the gentleman who was wrongly sent there,
Yeah.
which
And
the
yet,
administration admits was a mistake. But Trump's Justice Department was celebrating the court's ruling, and by Sunday argued Supreme Court only meant they had to follow the law in the United States. Once you're overseas, like it's got nothing to do with the courts and they have no business sticking their nose in it, that's a state secret, and it's up to the
mm,
president and the president alone to deal with that. The federal courts have no authority to direct the executive branch to conduct foreign relations any particular way or engage with a foreign sovereign in a given manner, lawyers wrote Sunday in response to the Friday order that they provide regular updates. And so the administration is now clearly signaling a willingness to push the envelope on how it's responding to the lower courts. And for the rest of the week, the White House is welcoming the president of El Salvador. And while
hello.
it's seemingly a
I am
prime
here.
opportunity to ask about Abrego Garcia,
Yeah.
a defiant Trump gave no indication he will do so.
Yeah. There is a real possibility that they're just gonna like do come
To
up with a
present them as
solution
a gift,
yeah.
on
Right. I'm not doing this because I was forced to by the courts. I just wanted very much to give you this
I
gift.
and only I can do this, therefore
Right.
here he is.
That sort of thing, or this was what, and then that's what we had planned all along as a statement. It's entirely possible. It's also now entirely possible that they will ignore it. They played a very interesting trick, and Trump himself gave the comment on one of the flights down or back, I can't remember which, which somebody asked him straight up, well, the Supreme Court now has ruled 9-0, essentially, that he needs to be brought back to the United States. What are you going to do? And Trump says, well, if the Supreme Court says somebody needs to be brought back, I'll bring them back. I respect the Supreme Court. And they said, okay, well, the Supreme Court has said that. And I guess someone must have, prepped him for it or whatever. But the deal, of course, is that the Supreme Court remanded to the lower court the case back to them and said, you're on the right track. I want you to change one word in the ruling from effectuate his return to facilitate his return, which they then did, and then went ahead and reissued the order. And Trump says, oh, but the order is coming from the lower court. I don't care very much for the lower courts. But if the Supreme Court says something, the Supreme Court ordered the lower court to issue this order, and they did it. The lower court's obeying the Supreme Court. Trump, though, is saying, I don't like these lower courts very much. And they're gonna have to go all the way back up, and the Supreme Court's gonna have to say, no, we meant what we meant. Oh, I didn't realize that.
Right. So we shall see.
Sounds fun.
But it sounds like, we're going to find out one way or the other. Will Trump defy the courts?
Yeah.
And that would be what people often refer to as a constitutional crisis.
Yeah. And lots of voices saying, well, I understand the trouble, but better to have it sooner than later. Like, why
well,
let
that's
it
not
linger?
what John Roberts thought. Supreme Court Justice, Supreme Court Justice, the Chief Justice,
the most supreme,
the leader Justice, decided that the best thing to do is to try to push this down the road and try to define legalistically narrow Trump wins, so he doesn't have to confront him.
I don't think he
I don't know why,
anticipated
because
this.
he's awful.
Yeah, well, he just thought that maybe there was something to this idea. Oh, well, I'll listen to the Supreme Court. Okay, well, now we've spoken. Oh, but you spoke through the lower court, so I don't have to listen to that. They probably weren't expecting to be quite that finely parsed, but here we are.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I guess the markets are open. I suppose we could pay some attention to that. I don't know whether...
Yeah, the expectation is the markets themselves will be okay. It's the bond market to watch this week. That's the one that's been really shaky.
Well, that opens at like 11.
And certainly consumer confidence and other, consumer-type indices, expectations for inflation are just all terrible. I mean, they're the worst they've been since 2008, and maybe in some cases even beyond that.
1808.
So, it's going to be a bad week in various and sundry ways. It's very difficult to look at the market and say, oh, this means something on any given day. Sometimes you can explain it. Trump's tariffs, it dropped. Trump says he's not going to do tariffs, it goes up. Yeah. But in the meantime, while people are uncertain, there's always folks who think they can make money by doing X, Y, or Z, and so they manipulate the market in their own way, legally. Buying stuff, selling stuff they think is going to go up and down. And, it's got nothing to do with what actually is going to happen. So it's not a predictor in that sense. The bond market is a different story. When yields go up in the bond market, it means that everybody that's not the United States government is losing faith in the United States government. And that's not a good thing.
All right. Well, yeah. Okay. I don't really know how to watch I'm not familiar with watching the bond market.
Watch the yields. If the yields go up, that's bad.
Okay.
If the yields go up, it means nobody's buying your bonds. So you better
You're trying to lure
offer
them
more
in.
yield so that you can attract investors.
Okay.
And if investors still don't come, then the yield goes up even more. So if you're watching yields go up and up and up and up, that's bad.
Okay. Got it. Are they going up?
They have been.
Okay. All right. Just checking.
Anyway, to get back to the courts,
Oh,
there's
yeah, sorry,
two
right.
sides to the court. There's the defense side, which is basically going to the courts and saying, please don't do this.
Yeah.
And then there's the offensive side, which is
I
Trump
am
using the
offended.
Department of Justice in an offensive way,
Yes.
because he's an offensive person. This one is from Tegan Goddard. The retribution is here. As Donald Trump once told his supporters, I am your retribution. Now he's making good. In a stunning escalation, Trump signed 2 executive orders that direct the federal government to investigate and punish 2 former officials from his own first term. You may have covered that. I didn't with you last week, but you might have. Chris Krebs,
yeah.
the former head
Right.
of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and Miles Taylor, former DHS official, who later
Right.
emerged as a critic. They're both private citizens, and the orders go far beyond political messaging. They target them for federal investigation. In Chris Krebs' case, open the door to criminal prosecution, which is just extraordinary. It's not a legal dispute. It's not policy. It's the sitting president of the United States using the full weight of executive authority to exact revenge on individuals he views as disloyal. Even Richard Nixon never went this far.
Yeah.
It is a chilling message to
very
anybody
badly.
who dares to defy Trump. Cross me, and the power of the presidency will come down on you.
Right.
And one of the reasons the power of the presidency is so powerful is because all these frickin' law firms fold at the first sign of trouble. Let alone
Yes.
universities and a whole bunch of other people, newspapers and other, folks who just, I want business as usual. Maybe if I keep my head down and go along, they'll leave me alone. It never happens that way.
No, I don't. And I think by now they understand that it doesn't really work, but I imagine they just think they're stuck. And when the president is ordering the entire weight of the government to come down on your head, they might be thinking, well, we just need to get out of here today, and then he'll be distracted by somebody else later on. I don't know, but yeah, it certainly doesn't. It's not safety. And once he figures out he can squeeze you once, he'll squeeze you a second, third, fourth time later on. But you don't know how long it's going to be before he comes back for seconds.
Right.
So
I mean,
happy
everybody
about that.
has already made their or formed their opinion of Donald Trump. If you hate him, if you think he's awful,
Sure.
if you think he's an authoritarian, whatever, known quantity.
I
But
guess.
what's striking to me are the apparatchiks that continue to explore the depths of loathing that they can bring out of you. And today it's Marco Rubio. This is a story in the Washington Post, which was just published last night. No evidence linking tough student to anti-Semitism or terrorism, State Department office found. State Department, that's Marco Rubio's State Department. An internal memo prepared days before Rumeysa Ozturk was detained by ICE agents raises doubts about the Trump administration's claim she supports Hamas.
Yes, I have my doubts.
The finding, contained in a March memo that was described to the Washington Post, said Secretary of State Marco Rubio did not have sufficient grounds for revoking Ozturk's visa under an authority empowering the top U.S. diplomat to safeguard foreign policy interests of the United States. The memo, written by an office within the State Department, raises doubts about the public accusations made by the Trump administration as it has sought to justify Ozturk's deportation. The Department of Homeland Security has said Ozturk engaged in activities in support of Hamas, a U.S.-designated terrorist organization, but neither the agency nor U.S. prosecutors have provided any evidence. The revocation of the visa is part of an expanding crackdown on international students and scholars, including hundreds of visa revocation cases. Ozturk, a 30-year-old doctoral student from Turkey, was targeted by the government for co-writing an op-ed last year criticizing the university's response to the Israel-Gaza war. Actually, what is today? Monday. Today's supposed to be her hearing date.
Oh.
In a federal court in Vermont.
Well, I hope it happens. Sure.
Nobody would comment from the federal government because we don't comment on ongoing litigation.
Yeah, I see. Is that right? I didn't realize.
Yeah, that's what
the
they
case.
claim.
Okay.
But after receiving a recommendation from the DHS that The State Department found that while Ozturk had protested Trump's relationship with Israel, neither DHS nor ICE nor Homeland Security investigations produced any evidence showing Ozturk had engaged in anti-Semitic activity or made public statements indicating support for a terrorist organization, according to U.S. government employees. It'll be interesting to see who gets treated more harshly, the guy who set fire to Shapiro's house or this lady.
Yes, right.
And which one gets more due process?
Yeah, and which one do they really think is anti-Semitic?
As a result of the lack of evidence, the department said she could be deported using a different authority under the Immigration and Nationality Act, that's the INA, which is often invoked, that allows for the revocation of a visa at the Secretary of State's discretion. But a key difference between the two authorities is the original one requires a rationale and explanation, and the authority ultimately used for Ozturk's deportation does not.
I see.
So, this is a loophole and bad, that, I can just decide that you need to get your visa revoked. I'm not thrilled with that, but if that's the law, that's the law.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those laws that was sort of designed in an era where it was just generally believed it would be too embarrassing for a Secretary of State, someone of such importance, to simply baldly state the opposite of the truth and just say, trust me on something as monumental and consequential as this. But as it turns out, no.
Yeah, so it turns out that, she wrote this op-ed and therefore was handcuffed, chained at the waist, and put in ankle shackles.
Sure, why not?
And again, it's part of what Douthat actually was referring to. They could have deported her quietly under this other authority that Marco Rubio, as Secretary of State, apparently has at his disposal.
And likewise abuses.
Instead, they declared her a terrorist, put her in shackles, and lied about what she was doing. Because why?
I don't know. I mean, I guess it was supposed to make them look tough.
Yeah, exactly.
But,
So when you're a mob boss who really doesn't, you can't say Trump doesn't understand the law. It's not Trump, it's the people around him. And they understand the law well enough to know how to push the Supreme Court to its limits.
Yeah.
So you can't say that they're stupid in that regard. They're unfortunately rather well practiced. They've been rehearsing this for 8 years.
Yes. Whereas it has become increasingly clear. We always, figured Trump didn't know a great deal about any of the things that he was doing. But it has been revealed in the last couple of days.
So let's, it's better to sound good than to be good.
But as he's answering questions about things in the last couple of days, he actually, I thought he would have taken the opportunity to say, yeah, I'm very strong about that. But he's instead saying, I don't know anything about it. I don't know about this. I don't know about that. He doesn't know about any of the things that are in the news. And it's weird because why not? Like, he consumes Fox News. Oh, yeah, well, he could lie about it. I'm very strong in doing this. He just says, I don't know.
Right.
I'm on my way to play golf. I don't know anything about it.
So here's a sort of interesting piece from Larry Diamond, who's a political scientist.
Okay.
He's writing in The Unpopulist, how to undo Trump's growing dictatorship and the damage it's inflicting. Not giving in to tyrants who count on obedience in advance is the key to defeating them. That's why I find all these fold-ups, these wimpy, no backbone approaches, they're always wrong. Democracy dies, to use T.S. Eliot's famous phrase from The Hollow Men, not with a bang, but with a whimper. Other people have said, empires don't get murdered, they commit suicide. So we're seeing it.
Yeah. Cool.
Anyway.
It's interesting to note from the inside, and it has made a lot of people wonder. I've heard this a couple times. People say the big ones, the fall of the Roman Empire, where people are just walking around saying, this is just so stupid. I can't believe Rome is doing this. Oh, well, chariot races tomorrow.
So Diamond says, an effective resistance agenda is necessarily selective. If democracy defenders scream at equal volume over every harmful presidential move without distinguishing between the varying levels of illegality, unconstitutionality, irrationality, cruelty, people stop listening. We need a strategy, and that's why the periodic monthly approach to protest works, whereas daily doesn't. Even weekly is somewhat suspect.
Yes.
We need a strategy to prioritize the most serious assaults, However, there's no room for passivity or patience. Early action is critical. Every actor inside and outside the government has a role to play. No federal worker should go quietly, even the ones, and especially the ones who voted for him. So the combination of internal resistance and public pressure proved particularly potent in the past, and the combination of internal resistance and judicial action can be potent as well. The courts have been actually pretty reasonable in standing up to most of what Trump does, with the exception of the occasional Supreme Court decision. But the courts are really central to a lot of this.
Yeah.
Congress, unfortunately, has collapsed. That's where you'd want your resistance to be. So Democrats are doing what they can. I'm not talking about Chuck Schumer. I'm talking about Chris Murphy and others, who are doing what they can given the tools that they have. And then, of course, there's elections, which we've been doing quite well with in special elections.
Yeah.
So people are resisting. We've talked about this. The problem, of course, is even if and when you succeed, the amount of harm done in the meantime is absolutely extensive.
Yes. There's and they're happy to rest on that and to simply say, even when they lose, well, I don't know. You can't prove I lost. You can't make me do this thing. Or even if you can, that's another 6 to 10 days of me wrecking your life, during which, you're litigating this once again, and we just go around and around in circles, like we're doing with the Supreme Court and the Garcia case. But right in the middle of all these wins, these proofs that Trump is lawless, all taking place in the context of Abrego Garcia still not here, and nobody is really sure whether he ever will show up. It's just that uncertain. Could show up on a plane tomorrow because the president of El Salvador is here and he wants to make a gift of him, or not ever. And that's a bad place to be. And it's worse for him and his family than anybody else on the planet. But we are stuck fighting about it.
That we are. So let's see. What else can we mention that was especially of interest? John Sides has a sort of interesting piece that I didn't expect. He was looking at the shift in public opinion for the last election, which wasn't what we want. But he points out on trade, public opinion's already moving away from Trump. So thermostatic politics rears its head again. I'm going to give you, I hope I can copy and paste this and that it works. This is in the,
I've seen the chart.
Okay. So this is Americans' view of foreign trade.
Let's take a closer look. Can I? I don't know.
Trump is elected in
There it is.
2024.
Yes, that is correct.
And all of a sudden,
I mean, I don't think he won, but whatever. Okay.
Americans' views of foreign trade positive as an opportunity for economic growth shoots up 21 points. Americans feel that foreign trade is a threat to the economy. Drops by a similar amount.
Okay.
So the opposite of what Trump claims. Trump claims he's helping trade by doing what he's doing, and people are saying, no, actually trade is good. You shouldn't be
don't mess with
tariffs here. Don't
mess
with it. And what's also interesting is that the public is now convinced that foreign trade is an opportunity. That makes sense. Democrats always see it as much more than ever before as an opportunity that's being lost. And Republicans, for the first time, I mean, this is just a huge change since 2024, see foreign trade as an opportunity to, I don't know what, bully other countries into doing what you want. But the change after Trump was elected for Republicans is astounding. Foreign trade was great, except when Biden was in office, when the bottom dropped out.
Wow.
And then Trump was elected, and all of a sudden, foreign trade is great again. I mean, this is like absolute cult thinking. It's just really interesting. It's not surprising. This is what's meant by thermostatic response. When Republicans have a Democrat in the White House, they hate everything. And all of a sudden, the very same thing when a Republican is there is suddenly wonderful. And Republicans are much more prone to that than Democrats, as this particular graph shows. So I just thought that was interesting.
I agree. It's very disturbing watching it, but it seems to be true. And I don't know. Also very interesting to think of foreign trade and international relations in general as a great opportunity to bully other countries. And as we watch, if Abrego Garcia is not turned over like in the next couple of days, as a gift or however they present it, people are going to start to wonder. I don't understand this kid president from El Salvador comes in and he's presented to you on a silver platter in the White House, and you didn't work this deal. What happened to Mr. Strongly Strong Tough Guy? How come you can't bully this country into just this one guy? Give him back. Why is that not happening? People will begin to wonder. I mean, not MAGA people. They love it. I'm glad somebody who's got a Hispanic surname is in prison. Wow. All right. Well, I don't know how to deal with you, but I'm sure I'll find a way to reach across the aisle and compromise with you later on.
Right. Anyway, that's what I have for today.
Okay.
That's the roundup of the weekend.
All right. I think that's a fair
little
encapsulation
of this, little
what
of that.
happened. And we'll see what other things I have put aside here. But I guess more about El Salvador as people continue to look into this closer and closer. It's becoming, I guess we're approaching 100%. Eventually we'll find out that every single person sent to the maximum security CCOT prison in El Salvador actually has no criminal record whatsoever. But I think we're running at about 90% already. And apparently the U.S. preparing to deport another tranche of disappeared people grabbed from off the street at a time when we're finding out that you're running an error rate of 90%, but no sign that that's going to stop them in any way. And today's meeting with President Bukele presented in NPR under the headline, "The World's Coolest Dictator Heads to the White House." How do you like that? And I don't know how's that going to play with the one we have, the other dictator.
I don't know. Maybe they did that just to annoy him.
Yeah, possibly. I did see circulating on social media last night, apparently when Bukele was inaugurated to his latest term in 2024, that Don Jr. was there, I guess, on behalf of the family, because it's not the government. But on hand for his inauguration, and the two of them having a moment and shaking hands and probably talking about crypto. I don't know what makes him the world's coolest dictator. Youngest, maybe. That's probably it. I don't know why they can't make the kids behave these days, though.
Right, and before I go, I should mention Rory McIlroy won the Masters.
Right.
And he won it in a one-hole playoff.
Oh.
And he beat the guy who always comes in second.
Well, that's his job.
Yeah.
He's here mowing the lawn right now outside the house.
Yeah, his name is Justin Rose. And he always finishes second. He just always does. Well, he's great, but he always finishes second. So
that's worth a lot of money, I must say.
McIlroy was leading most of the time, and as is his wont, he did a lot of
choking?
Unhelpful shots. I'm trying to say this in a polite way.
Okay.
I don't think he choked. I don't think people at that level do. But he often hits unhelpful shots right at the end to lose his lead. And he did again. But this time, he was just absolutely outstanding in the playoff. Justin Rose hit a beautiful shot close to the hole on the playoff hole.
That's what you want.
Then McIlroy did him better and put the ball even closer. Then Rose missed his putt, and McIlroy made his, and that was the ball game, as they say.
What can you do?
But the thing about it is that the social media at the beginning of this tournament had just this wonderful picture of McIlroy's little girl putting and making the putt. She's like, I don't know, 4. And it was just absolutely adorable and making the rounds. So I don't know much about golf. I don't know much about Rory McIlroy. He was a child prodigy who was great, but this is the Grand Slam of golf tournaments, which he finally won, and the last one to do it in the century was Tiger Woods. So he's good. I don't know what his politics are. I don't know anything else about him.
I think I think I had seen mentioned he actually was one of the big voices against the Saudi involvement. In
he stuck with the PGA. And he didn't do LIV or whatever.
I don't know whether that's indicative of anything else, but golfers, like if you're looking for somebody to like buddy up to in politics, professional golfer, terrible bet. Not a good environment for progressive politics.
Yeah,
but,
even if they're left-handed.
Yeah, but apparently, stuck in the internal politics of golf. It meant something.
Well,
it was a bad week for sports.
Playing on grounds that were segregated for years,
right?
Winning $20 million at a time on tournaments, and then being really interested in tax policy,
right?
Which is to say, don't tax me at all. No, they tend not to be great political pairs for us. But, that's cool.
Yeah.
And his daughter's adorable.
There's that. So you can just enjoy it on a personal level. Also, so I guess probably Trump thinks he's an anti-Trump golfer. I don't know I don't know whether he is, but he probably thinks that because he didn't sign off, didn't abandon the PGA Tour for his thing. And that's personally disturbing to him. Yeah. I guess. Right? I couldn't lure him to the live golf thing, so he's bad. But Trump also spent part of the weekend at another UFC fight, I understand, and a very, very pro-Trumpy, like loudmouth pro-Trump fighter was on the card, and I guess probably Trump was excited to see him. This guy, praising him to the heavens. Anyway, as it happens, he got completely destroyed. He got choked out in his bout. And it was not a great day for Trump sports-wise. I don't know whether he bets or not. But anyway, all the people that he thought should have won didn't, and the people he thought should have lost didn't. So I don't know. I don't know if that bothers him or not. He also apparently snubbed Cheryl Hines, RFK Jr.'s wife, who asked for a handshake at the thing, and she looked like she was a little miffed about it. Yeah, if anybody takes small pleasures and things like that, that opportunity is there for you. The video is circulating online. So there you go. That's important. All right, I've got things pocketed. You're welcome to stick around and chime in again if you find something on social media or send it along. I don't think so. Or if you'd like to come here and mow the lawn at any point.
I'm not going to do that either.
Okay.
But I will talk to you on Wednesday.
Absolutely. Terrific. Wonderful. Thank you for carrying us through. And let me know. Anything else comes up or the bond market goes crazy, feel free to send a note. Okay. I'll continue on for here. We only have a couple of minutes before our next break anyway. I'll tell people about the world's coolest dictator, who is Bukele, apparently. I guess he decided on that as his own nickname. And NPR, I don't know whether they're doing it ironically or what, but they've, I guess, decided to go along with that. I thought it was an interesting editorial decision. NPR's Alfie Pennell is the author of the piece. Whether or not they had anything to do with the headline, you never know. But this is datelined Mexico City. So what's going on here? Nayib Bukele, who's an interesting person, no doubt. Like interesting bad, but interesting. I recommend, if you haven't, taking a look just right at the Wikipedia article on him. He's got a very convoluted political past, including sort of, starting out as many of the world's worst wackos did, as something of a committed leftist, and then ending up a hard right world's coolest dictator somehow. It's an interesting tale. It's also very interesting, and I'm not sure exactly how to put this. I thought about saying something on social media yesterday. I'm like, this is going to be misinterpreted. Here, at least you can couch it in terms of, this is maybe misinterpreted, but bear with me for a second. But like if you have said, I think I've mentioned it on the show, if you have said to yourself, Nayib Bukele, what kind of a Salvadoran name is that? The answer is it's not. He's of Salvadoran, not Salvador. Of course, he's of Salvadoran background. He's born in El Salvador. He's the president. I don't know if you know this, of El Salvador. He's of Palestinian heritage. His father immigrated, I guess, but as a youngster. I mean, it's a long, long time ago. But it's an interesting background. I just thought it was interesting to note that Donald Trump has found someone of Palestinian heritage that he likes. One guy, as it turns out. And it's because he will imprison anybody that Trump asks him to. That's just an interesting thing. And of course, for us to be concerned that the Trump administration is essentially kidnapping people off the streets here in America and then dumping them in El Salvador, it's a sensitive time to talk about people of Palestinian background holding people prisoner, right? So, it was not going to be a constructive comment, generally speaking. But if you limit it to how interesting that he's found one Palestinian he's willing to deal with. And it's this coolest dictator in the world. How odd. Anyway, Nayib Bukele, El Salvador's president and self-styled world's coolest dictator. And there's a link here to an AP story that maybe, I don't know, is that the origin story of why he calls himself the coolest dictator? Maybe. Coolest dictator to philosopher king, he now, I guess, accepts as a title as well. Nayib Bukele's path to re-election in El Salvador. That's where the world's coolest dictator moniker came from. But the NPR article continues here just as I set up to exit to the break. Bukele is one of Trump's most crucial regional allies. I think he is the first of the Latin American dignitaries to have a state visit, maybe the only one. This is an area that Trump doesn't pay a great deal of attention or respect to at all. But in comes Bukele, one of the most critical regional allies, and no one has embraced his anti-immigration policies as enthusiastically. With Bukele's support over the past few weeks, the Trump administration has deported and imprisoned hundreds of alleged Venezuelan and Salvadoran gang members to El Salvador. Turns out not many of them really are. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show, and let's continue on reading about... I'm going to skip a little bit here to try and give some more background with our time here on Bukele. We all know about his acceptance of our detainees, although we don't know very much about them. And that, too, is parked somewhere in pocket. Details are beginning to emerge, but like with almost everything else, Trump and paperwork everywhere. There's all sorts of technical reasons why this thing isn't entirely legal or isn't in compliance with our own practice. Very few people in the last couple of weeks were able to say with certainty what the nature of the agreement with El Salvador actually was. And I understand the Trump administration currently attempting to hide it essentially from view, but some other process people pointing out over the weekend, there's a certain doctrine with which I'm not familiar, but I guess statutory doctrine requiring that any such agreement with a foreign nation eventually Congress has to be notified of it at some level, even if it's super top secret. The Gang of Eight needs to know about it, and nobody has seen this thing. So details beginning to emerge. I think I had seen the price tag of about $6 million hung on it, but it was an annual agreement, an annual contract, and that at the end of 1 year of incarceration in CCOT, the American government was supposed to give further instructions about what we're going to do with all the people it's detaining there. And it's just a weird situation and odd. And I think I did see also on social media just in the last couple days or so a confirmation of the way we viewed the agreement on here on the show and my own and social media observations that there was at some point, it was a couple of days ago, about a week ago at some point, I saw Joshua Friedman discussing the Fourth Circuit's consideration of Judge Zenas's orders with respect to Kilmar Abrego García and the government's argument that this was an intrusion into the conduct of foreign policy and therefore someplace that the courts had no authority at all. And I was wondering about that at the time, like, what foreign policy is it we're talking about here? There's no foreign policy. This is a foreign government we're dealing with, yes, but this is a contractual relationship. We're paying them to warehouse people that we've asked them to incarcerate, but to do so contractually. This is a contract enforcement action, not the conduct of foreign policy. And as it turns out, a week later, the president of El Salvador agrees. I have seen, this Blue Sky post from Harry Littman, who is, by the way, host and executive producer both of the Talking Feds podcast, and Talking San Diego, a lawyer out there in California, former U.S. attorney, et cetera, but in his own coverage of this situation, writing that the transfer to El Salvador of U.S. deportees is, per President Bukele, the world's coolest dictator, by the way, a straight-up contract that has, quote, nothing to do with foreign policy, end quote. So I guess we thank you for confirming our priors there, President Bukele. You are indeed the world's coolest dictator. Thank you for agreeing with us. But his post goes on to say the fees we are paying makes their entire prison system sustainable. That in quotes, sustainable. Don't see how the U.S. can make the argument that bringing Abrego Garcia back is some sort of sensitive foreign policy matter. And it is not. All right. Well, anyway, back to the article about him supposedly calling himself the world's coolest dictator. I don't know if they're really going to get to the why of that. It's just something he wants people to call him, and that's it. But here is some of the background we need to know about the guy, and maybe we can spend a little time on him today. The rise of the Bukele doctrine is a subheader in all of this. Subsection. Bukele was first elected president in 2019 after a campaign focused on combating corruption. In 2022, he declared a state of emergency to tackle gang crime and sky-high homicide rates. That on the surface sounds like something you'd want, right? Under the law, which remains in place, Bukele has arrested some 85,000 people, according to Human Rights Watch. And when you have Human Rights Watch keeping an eye on you like that, you get a sense of exactly, how scary this is. And 85,000 people, that seems like a lot. Only 1,000 of those arrested were ever, by the way, convicted of any crimes, with many innocent people allegedly incarcerated. So, telling him that you're incarcerating an innocent person from the United States is probably not going to bother him a great deal. Unless, of course, the American president says, well, if you do that, we're going to bomb you. Then that would probably disturb him. Under Bukele, El Salvador has become the newest autocracy in the Americas, said Noah Bullock, executive director of Cristosal, is that right? A Salvadoran human rights NGO. Cristosal. Okay, that makes some sense. Anyway, Sal from Salvador, probably not salt, but, Salvador, savior. All right, anyway. Despite being widely condemned for human rights abuses, even though he heads a company named El Salvador, many in the Americas, including President Trump, admire Bukele for successfully reducing the number of homicides in a country that for years had one of the highest murder rates in the entire world. Homicides fell from over 2,000 in 2019 to just 114 last year. Undeniably fewer of them. I don't know. Is it undeniable? The dictator is reporting a huge drop. Was there a huge drop? A huge drop was reported by a dictator. Cool dictator, but by a dictator. So I don't know. If the numbers are to be believed, they're good. Only last week, the State Department upgraded El Salvador's travel safety rating to a much-coveted level 1, a gesture that didn't go unrecognized, I guess there's some typo here, by Bukele, who has repeatedly tweeted the news. He's very happy about it. Exercise normal precautions in El Salvador. Gang activity has decreased over the last 3 years, the advisory stated. The level 1 rating is only held by a tiny handful of Latin American countries and is above the level 2 travel rating recommended for countries like UK, Sweden, and France. They're telling you it's safer in El Salvador. Okay. Politicians throughout the region trying to look for quick solutions for the violence coming from organized crime are attempting to use the Bukele discourse, said Juanita Gilbertus Estrada, director of the Americas division at HRW, that's Human Rights Watch. All of this has helped bolster his popularity at home. The president enjoys up to 80% approval. Everyone who's not in jail approves of him. And won his re-election in 2024 by a landslide, though Bullock notes that many are too scared to publicly oppose him. It's one of the things about dictators, even cool ones. This next section here is about a MAGA alliance and is illustrated with a photo of Bukele speaking at CPAC, a place notoriously friendly and welcoming to Central Americans. Among Bukele's many regional fans are MAGA Republicans. Donald Trump Jr. attended Bukele's second-term inauguration in June of 2024. The MAGA faithful cheered him on as he spoke at the CPAC conference in Washington in February of last year. The Trump administration also has close diplomatic ties to El Salvador. Both Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem paid visits to the country on their first overseas trips. You've heard about that. And those visits, I don't know if you could call them major successes, but they were arranged. This is an interesting quote here, too. El Salvador is the only country, at least in Central America, that has shown 100% willingness to do everything that the United States has required, said Ana Maria Mendez Dardon, Central America Director at the Washington office on Latin America. This willingness has most notoriously extended to sending hundreds of Venezuelan and Salvadoran migrants accused of alleged gang affiliation to Bukele's infamous mega prison, the Terrorism Confinement Center, or CCOT, in part invoking the obscure 1798 Alien Enemies Act to target alleged members of Tren de Aragua, a Venezuelan prison gang. The deportations have been widely condemned, as you know, continue to be heavily scrutinized in the U.S. courts. Human Rights Watch calls them forced disappearances to a center known for its abusive conditions. And now the next section, what's on the table at the White House? He's not stacking up hamburgers for him, I don't think. I'm just sort of imagining Trump saying Taco Bell. And like, well, guy, it's not Mexico, and even if it was, Taco Bell's not the answer, but okay. The taco salads at Trump Tower are the best. I love Hispanics. You remember that? That was a real thing. He actually did. What's on the table for this big meeting that's going on today? At their meeting on Monday, the two leaders are expected to discuss further cooperation on migration, tariffs, really, and the potential detention of in El Salvador of dangerous American criminals. Trump really does want to actually explore that as a possibility. These would be heinous, violent criminals who have broken our nation's laws repeatedly. These are violent, repeat offenders in American streets, said Caroline Leavitt, Trump's press secretary. But of course, with a 90% error rate so far, it would be fair for you to have some doubts. It might not be legal for you to express those doubts, but it would be fair for you to have some. So all of this, we know about this. We understand that he's attempting to do this, and that there's all sorts of arguments, some stupid, some not quite as stupid, about whether or not there's any authority for the American courts to order the return of Kilmar Abrego García. That brings us to the end of this article. I'm a little bit interested in more of this background business, but this is now a year old. February of 2024, this AP article that was linked in the NPR piece, coolest dictator to philosopher king. Like, it's beginning to sound like he's some sort of combination of Donald Trump Jr. and Curtis Yarvin here, except, I don't know whether he's doing his own writing or he's just whatever. What makes him a philosopher king? Let's see. This is again about his re-election, which Christopher Sherman at the AP writes about by saying now he'll likely have 5 more years to provoke surprise and raise concerns after appearing, anyway, to win a landslide re-election as the Central American country's president. Preliminary and partial results on Monday suggested Bukele had romped to victory on Sunday. We heard about that in the previous piece. By the way, just more background here. Consolidating Governmental Power is the title of this subsection. In February 2020, Bukele entered the Legislative Assembly with rifle-toting soldiers after lawmakers balked at approving a security loan proposal. The symbolism of Bukele taking the seat of the chamber's president, backed by the military, was powerful. They've seen that before in Central America. In April of that year, early in the coronavirus pandemic, police began taking violators of his stay-at-home orders to quarantine centers for up to 30 days. That's not going to... Does MAGA know about that? Well, probably not. And even if they did, well, in that case, it would have been cool and awesome. Whereas here in the United States, no, we were against that. When the Supreme Court said that violated the Constitution, and we're talking about the El Salvadoran Constitution and Supreme Court, Bukele vowed to ignore the ruling and tweeted, "It is one thing to interpret the Constitution and another very different thing to order the murder of people." Human rights groups later said the detentions continued. I don't even know exactly what he means by that. But keep in mind, this is him defying the Supreme Court of El Salvador to forcibly confine people during COVID. Hugely successful position to take with MAGA. When Bukele's party took control of Congress the following year, lawmakers quickly purged the Supreme Court's constitutional chamber, which had ruled against Bukele on several occasions. Look out for that. The new court interpreted the Constitution differently when it came to an apparent ban on consecutive re-election. Did you know that wasn't allowed under their Constitution, and yet here he is? In September of 2021, it ruled that such a re-election was not prohibited and ordered the Supreme Electoral Tribunal to allow a second term. But that didn't even come until 2024. That's further in advance than you would think he would press that case. On defanging the gangs, Bukele was not the first president of El Salvador to negotiate with the gangs. Not defang them, but negotiate with them, apparently, that held an iron grip on its streets. But when local media reported that Bukele's administration was not only negotiating, but granting gang leaders benefits in return for maintaining a lower level of bloodshed, Bukele vehemently denied it. So it's a maybe, but he's denying it. Then in 2022, the carnage of March 26th happened. What was it? Gangs killed 62 people in a single day across the country, a toll not seen for years, not since The Godfather 2. But this is serious, real people, not a movie. Bukele sought and received special powers, arrests without warrants, no access to a lawyer, broad authority to intercept communications, all the things that Trump wants here. Any secret negotiations were replaced by a highly publicized crackdown. Thousands of troops surrounded neighborhoods or entire towns. They went door to door grabbing people. Yay. Some police spoke of having to meet arrest quotas as Bukele tweeted how many people had been arrested each day and shared slick videos of nearly naked inmates frog-marched across prison yards. Nearly 2 years later, more than 76,000 people have been arrested under that authority, which the Congress continues to extend every month. The government has acknowledged at least 7,000 were mistakenly swept up and later released. They released them. So there is some precedent for this. Human rights groups have documented dozens of deaths of people inside prisons who had not yet been tried. Bringing safety to the streets is the next section. I suppose that's debatable, but the crackdown has been tough, but people have reclaimed their neighborhoods. Small businesses no longer extorted into oblivion. People can safely seek jobs in neighborhoods formerly controlled by rival gangs, as long as nobody thinks they're in a gang and puts them away in prison with no trial, I guess. Children can walk to school without fear of forced gang recruitment. That's Bukele's justification. Those who criticize the crackdown are defending gangsters, he says. Those who talk of human rights were absent when gangs maintained dominion over swaths of the country, he said. They didn't give us human rights. Well, we are supposed to do better. On Sunday, Bukele pushed back at critics. This is, again, a year ago. El Salvador has gone from having among the highest homicide rates in the world a decade ago to being one of the safest countries in the Western Hemisphere. He said, just don't have any human rights in it. Okay. I mean, that's interesting background. Again, I also recommend taking a look at that, his early life and political evolution in the Wikipedia article on him. And I think I've asked you to take a look at that before. I found it very surprising and interesting, including his political origins in the FMLN, the Salvadoran political party that was associated with the Sandinista front back in the olden days in the 80s, when we were busy funding right-wing death squads to make sure that we got rid of those guys. Apparently they were offering political training to the world's coolest dictator. It's been a journey. We can say that much. All right, let's see. A headline from the Wall Street Journal that tops my list for some reason in today's pocket listing is of interest. I can only share that with you because I'm not really a Wall Street Journal subscriber, so there's not much I can share with you beyond it. But what else do you want to know besides Binance, the crypto company? Binance seeks to curb U.S. oversight of them while in deal talks with Trump's crypto company, just in case you thought there was maybe there's no corruption going on today. Anyway, executives for the cryptocurrency exchange met with Treasury officials last month after the company entered into talks with the Trump family venture. How exciting is that? And it is illustrated with fun-looking video of Eric Trump walking around with a big smile on his face, giving people the thumbs up. Is it Eric Trump? I think so. Surrounded by Saudi-looking gents in traditional headdress and everything. So clearly nothing problematic going on there. Anyway, just thought that was interesting. Binance, please don't look our way when you're regulating us. And a good reason not to do it is we will cut the Trump family in for several $1 billion if you just, leave us alone. So I guess that's happening. All right. What other things have I put aside here? Some of them I have to click on to see what they are again, depending on where they came from. Yeah. Oh, yeah, right. So about the written agreement, if any, with the Salvadorans. Ryan Goodman had sent this around over the weekend. Co-editor-in-chief at Just Security, Ryan Goodman, if you thought you recognized his name. Yes. We've read him before on the show. The administration, he says, is going to run into a legal bind. Oh, no, not one of them. One, as a baseline outer limit, apparently, the written agreement with El Salvador is limited to 1 year. Whether or not they'll, actually live up to that or not, we'll see. But remember, El Salvador is taking cash for this. So, they may very well say, well, we're in it for the money. I thought we were pretty clear about that. 2 here, the text reads, pending the United States' decision on their long-term disposition. That is, we have a 1-year agreement, and you are going to hold them in exchange for this $6 million pending the United States' decision. The U.S. will make the decision on what to do long-term with these prisoners. Now, that's the legal bind that Ryan is talking about here, is that the federal government is in court over the status of Kilmar Abrego García and saying nothing we can do. He's in Salvadoran hands now. They're a sovereign government. The United States has no jurisdiction over them. The United States Supreme Court can't order them to do anything, yada, yada. But one, we have the coolest dictator himself saying, this is not foreign policy. This is a contract. 2, the contract says it's up to the United States to decide at some point within the 1-year lifespan of the contract what to do with these people long term. So apparently the contract contemplates the United States being able to decide what should happen to each of the people. including the possibility of asking for one or more or all of them back. And yet they're in court saying, we don't know, there's nothing we can do. It's a little bit contradictory. This Ryan's comment is appended to Kyle Cheney's post on Blue Sky, which is about a day old now, saying an update. Trump seems to say for the first time that the U.S. lacks the ability to recover those sent to El Salvador if the government deports someone erroneously. Says it's totally up to Bukele. Seems to leave out that he could, ask Bukele to help fix an error. That according to a Politico report on the subject, and then Donald Trump's screen-capped Truth Social post, looking forward to seeing President Bukele of El Salvador on Monday, and basically disavowing A, any care about what's happening, and B, any power to do anything about any mistaken deportations, most of them being mistaken deportations. And not even deportations at that. But okay, I just thought that was of some interest. Apparently, the Associated Press, somewhere along the line, got a hold of what purports to be the written agreement between the two countries, although I have not seen them reporting on it directly, but I'm sure it's floating out there, and I just haven't been able to put it in front of me. All right. Another story that you should be aware of, and another tactic being used by the dodgy boys and the federal government in general, needs to be brought to your attention. The Washington Post has reported on here under this headline, an exclusive. Trump administration overrode Social Security staff to list immigrants as dead. They've come up with a new tactic here that essentially taking people who are immigrants, many of whom have legal status, and because they have legal status, they have pursued A, work in the United States, and because they've pursued work in the United States, B, a Social Security number, which entitles them to do that work legally and to pay their taxes on it. It's been very interesting watching this administration and their dodgy lackeys capturing all this data and doing things like continuing to insist, as they often did on the campaign trail, that immigrants, even legal immigrants to this country, people who are political asylees, etc., are not contributing to this country. They're just taking. They don't pay taxes like you and me, but they are being rounded up and sent back to their country of origin based on data seized from the Social Security Administration. In other words, because you paid your taxes, we're going to use your tax information to find you so that we can arrest you and ship you out of the country because we're so mad at you for not paying your taxes. Get it? Well, anyway, this new tactic makes it even tougher. Even if they can't get you out of the country fast enough, they simply declare you to be dead in the eyes of the Social Security Administration, which then invalidates your Social Security number, which then invalidates your ability to work legally in the United States, which then also leads to a number of other terrible knock-on effects. You don't get any benefits you might be entitled to. You certainly can't collect unemployment. You don't have a Social Security number anymore. You're just existing in this legal limbo because they flipped the switch in the computer, dodgy specialty, that says you're dead. Can they do it to American citizens? Sure, why not? Nothing about it is legal, but what the hell? Why not give it a try? Let me read you some of this story. A senior executive, the subheader says, who objected, was marched out of his office and put on leave while earlier warnings about the agency's deaths database were ignored. We're just about up to our next break here, but we'll set the table for what we'll talk about when we come back. Hannah Nathanson, Lisa Rain, R-E-I-N, I think, and Merrill Cornfield have the byline for this piece. 2 days after the Social Security Administration purposely and falsely labeled 6,100 living immigrants as dead, security guards arrived at the office of a well-regarded senior executive in the agency's Woodlawn, Maryland headquarters. Greg Pear, maybe it's Pear with an extra R and an E on the end. P-E-A-R-R-E. Greg Pear, Perry, I don't know how he pronounces it. I wish I did. who oversaw a staff of hundreds of technology experts, had pushed back on the Trump administration's plan to move the migrants' names into a Social Security death database, eliminating their ability to legally earn wages, and officials hoped, spurring them to leave the country. In particular, Pierre had clashed with Scott Coulter, the new chief information officer installed by Elon Musk, who no one elected. Pierre told Coulter the plan was illegal, cruel, and risked declaring the wrong people dead, so he's out. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We'll conclude today's show with a segment on this. This is an important story, I think. May not have reached everybody, but perhaps you heard about it over the weekend. And, by the way, I'm just thinking about the way that paragraph concluded, that this guy, Greg Pear, and I wish I knew more about how to say his last name, Pear. Maybe, why don't we say Pear with an extra R-E at the end? Anyway, but the Pear told Scott Coulter, Elon Musk's guy at the Social Security Administration, not the one who was already inside the Social Security Administration, which was, what's his name, Dudek? Is that right? Is it Leland? I don't know. Anyway, his name, I think, comes up in all of this too. But the chief information officer installed by Elon Musk is Scott Coulter. Pear tells Coulter the plan's illegal, cruel, and it says here, risked declaring the wrong people dead. I mean, that was the point of the thing, was to declare the wrong people dead. I don't know how much risk it was. It's 100% risk that you're going to do. The whole idea was to declare known living people to be dead. Anyway, I don't know why they phrased it that way. But his objections, Pear's objections, did not go over well with Trump political appointees. And so on Thursday, security guards in Pear's office told him it was time to leave. They actually, came to his office and escorted him out. They walked Pear out of the building, capping a momentous internal battle over the novel strategy pushed by Musk's U.S. Dodgy Service and the Department of Homeland Security, why are they even involved, to add thousands of immigrants ranging in age from teenagers to octogenarians to the agency's death master file, which does sound rather disturbing, don't you think? Yes. In fact, because death, we can use the horror, dramatic, minor key version of that. The death, it's disturbing enough to call the death master file, but if you're the death master file, then it's even worse. Anyway, but very signature move for the dodgy boys, really, to just say, well, why don't we use technology to lie? And the lie will produce these results, and we like those results, so why not do it? All we're doing is, are those people dead? No. Are we murdering them? No. We're just turning off their ability to live in the United States. And that's fine with us because we want them to leave anyway. Are they the wrong people? Are they the right people, but for the wrong reasons? We don't know. We don't care. We just want to make this happen. The episode also followed earlier warnings from senior Social Security officials that the database was insecure and could be easily edited without proof of death. A vulnerability, staffers say, that the Trump administration has now exploited. So it wasn't even so much that the dodgy boys did some tough reprogramming of the database. They just found it unsecured for some reason and said, well, let's exploit it so long as it's unsecured. The warnings and PAIR's removal have not previously been reported. This account of how the Trump administration pushed Social Security to wrongly declare thousands of living immigrants dead is based on interviews with 15 people, including current and former Social Security officials, many of whom spoke on condition of anonymity, of course, for various reasons, and I think you know what they are, as well as more than 24 pages of records obtained by the Washington Post. Experts in government, consumer rights, and immigration law said the administration's action is illegal. Oh, no. Labeling people dead, there are several problems with it, of course, and they did a pretty good job, I think, from my skimming of the article, of laying them out. But wait till you hear. Labeling people dead strips them of the privacy protections granted to living individuals. Isn't that interesting? So sharing all of your information, which is illegal under current law, only applies to people who are alive, or rather more precisely, I guess the argument goes, people who are considered to be alive by our computers for whatever reason. But if the computer, even if we made it do this intentionally, we by hand flip the switch to dead for you, knowing that you aren't dead, if the computer says you're dead, that's apparently the end of your privacy rights, which is weird. Again, I mean, why doesn't the law say you have those rights if you're alive? And if we can see that you're alive, despite what the computer says, you still have privacy rights? Apparently that's not it, which is weird. Procedural and interesting, but weird. Anyway, so where were we? Labeling people dead strips some of the privacy protections granted to living individuals, and knowingly classifying living people as dead, doing that on purpose, counts as falsifying government records, they said. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I think you can see exactly why that would happen. If that person's alive and you say, no, go into the government records and put him down as dead, you've now, what? Falsified government records. But for people who forged electoral college votes, this is not going to be a stretch. It's just bad, and like way bad at that, and go to jail bad for anybody else, but it's all get out of jail free in the Trump administration. This is in addition to the harm inflicted on those people actually suddenly declared dead, who become unable to earn a living legally in this country or draw benefits that they may be eligible for. Social Security itself has acknowledged that an incorrect death declaration is a devastating blow. Devastating enclosed in quotes here for this. This is an unprecedented step, said Devin O'Connor, senior fellow on the Federal Fiscal Policy Team for the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, a progressive think tank. The administration seems to basically be saying that they have the right to essentially declare people equivalent to dead who have not died. That's a hard concept to believe, but it brings enormous risks and consequences. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said that by adding the immigrant names to the death database, the Trump administration is protecting lawful American citizens and their hard-earned Social Security benefits, and ensuring illegal immigrants will no longer receive such economic entitlements. Anyone who disagrees with the common sense policies of this administration can find a new job, if you were previously working at the Social Security Administration, that is. And, of course, a million problems with that, including all of the assumptions about these people being illegal immigrants, which they are not. They are legal, and that is why they went to the Social Security Administration to get Social Security numbers. But Caroline Leavitt doesn't care about that. She just wants to say the word illegal over and over. Officials at Social Security, which has gutted its press office after months of turmoil over declining services, did not respond to requests for comment. Coulter, An investment firm founder named to the top technology job on March 27th hung up on a reporter from the Post on Friday. Pear declined to comment. He's got enough problems, I guess, in his life. He joined Social Security right out of college, rising from an entry-level IT job to a senior executive position overseeing the agency's sprawling databases. After his removal from his office this past week, he was placed on paid leave, possibly severing his 25-year career. Guy who knows everything about how the system works, out because he said, actually, this would be not only devastating to the people you're doing it to, but wrong, false, and illegal. What happens to you when this goes on? You become financially paralyzed. That's the header of the next section here. Staffers at Social Security began raising the alarm about the urgent need to address a flaw before they started exploiting it. A flaw in the agency's deaths database in February. According to a person familiar with the matter and records obtained by the Post, anybody granted the appropriate permissions within Social Security could mark someone as dead, employees had realized, without having to prove the demise in any way. That seems odd for a agency now on alert for looking out for waste, fraud, and abuse. Shouldn't you have to prove just about anything? Now that you have to prove everything about your citizenship in order to vote somewhere, they're dead. How do you know? I don't know. I made it up. Do you have a death certificate? No. Do you have a news report of their death? No. That's it? You just say they're dead. So, no proof necessary. How could you do it? How would you normally do it? Well, for example, you might reference medical records or a death certificate. But to hell with all of that. In emails and meetings that rose up the management chain, employees warned that the data set was vulnerable to manipulation or mispronunciation, perhaps. According to the person and the records that they saw, the employees' fear was partly that a bad actor, someone who might be acting inside of the administration, but a bad one, doing it badly, would be able to gain access to government credentials and label groups of living individuals as dead to target them for punishment. According to the person and the records, some of those raising the alarm worried specifically that the Trump administration might try to use the database to go after people the president dislikes, the person said. Management indicated they were looking into the matter and exploring a proposed solution that would have required some additional proof of death before placing them in the death master file, according to the person and the records. And that would seem to make a certain amount of sense, don't you think? But, if they don't like, I don't know, pick anybody. Bernie Sanders. I mean, you'd be able to convince people Bernie Sanders died. He's an elderly fellow as it is. But, whatever. Take your pick. Bernie Sanders. Somebody that they face in court a lot and they don't like because they keep losing to them, a well-known critic. You just declare them dead, but apparently you'll find out in the rest of this article what a nightmare it is to convince the Social Security Administration that this has been done in error and to reverse it, which is amazing that they won't do it given that they now know that that can be done without any proof of your death. Well, can you prove that you're alive? I don't know. You never proved that I was dead. Does it really matter? Why is it that you can declare me dead with no proof, but you can't declare me back alive again with anything but seeing me, speaking to you in the flesh? I don't know. Anyway, management said they were looking into the matter and exploring a proposed solution, and no solution was enacted because it became convenient. Apparently, entry into the death master file has potentially severe consequences, effectively erasing a person's ability to live and draw wages in the United States, according to Jim Francis, a consumer law attorney. Francis, who recently sued Social Security for mistakenly labeling a Maryland woman dead, noted that the agency sells its death information to creditors, pension companies, life insurers, and credit reporting firms. It's the source of that data that the whole world uses, which is why, if it's inaccurate, it has such devastating impacts on people, Francis said. Overnight, you become financially paralyzed, and that, I'm sure, was an attractive prospect to the dodgy folks. Tom Kind, a 90-year-old retiree who lives in Denver, recently experienced the nightmare himself when he was wrongly added to the deaths database without his knowledge. At least that could be like an honest mistake. He's 90. Someone heard. I don't know, but I don't know who does this stuff. I heard Tom Kind died. Tom Kind, the Tom Kind of Denver. I don't know how that happens, but okay. What ends up happening to you? Well, guess what? At age 90, or at any age this could happen to you, but it's particularly worrisome perhaps at age 90, you are reported dead. Guess what you lose? He wasn't working, right? So it's not like he lost his job or his ability to draw wages, but he did lose his health care coverage. Why? You don't have health care coverage. We don't have to pay for health care coverage for you. You're dead. What? No, I'm not. I will be if I don't get this health care. Well, this will resolve itself in a few days. You're 90. Wow. Yikes, right? He lost his health care coverage and his Social Security benefits. We're not giving them to you. You're dead. No, I'm not. I'm right here. Computer says you're dead. That's A1. So can't be wrong. He struggled to navigate a bureaucratic maze to set this all right, learning that he needed to prove he was still alive to the agency by completing an in-person interview at a field office, which at least, at 90, that's going to be a real problem, but it at least makes some sense. If I show up, will you believe I'm alive? Yes. Anything else I can do short of that, given that you put me in a death master file with no proof whatsoever? Can I call you on the phone? That's more proof than you had when you did this. No. Well, anyway, that's not any fun, having to go to do a personal interview in one of the offices. Around the same time, Social Security staff were warning that the agency's powerful ability to declare deaths could be exploited. The Department of Homeland Security and the U.S. Dodgy Service arrived at the agency. Soon, representatives of both groups were hunting for ways to repurpose the agency's databases to identify and deport illegal immigrants. And that's very imaginative. A staff of fewer than a dozen career employees was assigned to work with Musk's team on the project, according to a senior official who left the agency around that time, because he thought it sucked, I guess. Career employees were concerned that they might be facilitating something illegal, asking themselves if they were at risk of going to jail for the work they were doing, the official said. The dodgy boys won't go, but you might. It's a valid concern. By March, Dodgy's focus on immigration issues was clear, according to two people with knowledge of the team's activities. Remember, Dodgy was supposed to be about government efficiency and finding waste, fraud, and abuse and lowering costs. And I guess having failed to do that, they now consider themselves to be an immigration enforcement team. Dodgy representatives were asking a lot of questions about which kinds of address, wage, and tax data they could access, and how that information could be used to determine citizenship status, the people said. One official chose to resign rather than remain in what he saw as an illegal attempt to repurpose the agency, the whole agency, for immigration enforcement. Homeland Security, meanwhile, was at first made less intrusive requests, according to the senior official and records obtained by the Post. DHS agents spent much of February and March trawling through years of records in E-Verify, the Homeland Security Employment Verification Program, to identify potentially fraudulent Social Security numbers, according to the records. Agents then reached out to Social Security asking for help preventing this type of fraud, the records show. Homeland Security also requested that Social Security staff turn over the addresses of undocumented immigrants so Immigration and Customs Enforcement could track them down for deportation, the former senior official said. It was not the first time that Trump officials sought to make Social Security hand over some of the government's most sensitive personally identifiable information to facilitate deportations. During Trump's first term, a White House aide requested the names and Social Security numbers of employers thought to have hired undocumented immigrants, the former official said. Then they got wind of that, and it turned out probably those employers were Mar-a-Lago members, and nothing came of it. Now, at the time, the General Counsel's office at Social Security said no. They had determined that such a search would be a fishing expedition, the former official said, and would break the law. So the issue was dropped. But now, of course, he's got immunity, so I guess it's easier to do. A shift in administration demands is next. No such resistance emerged this time. In recent weeks, Homeland Security's requests shifted According to the former senior Social Security official, immigration agents began meeting with dodgy representatives at the agency to discuss how they could achieve their larger goal of pushing tens of thousands of migrants that ICE was struggling to apprehend and deport, the official said. That request soon morphed into the idea of placing immigrants into the deaths database, the official said. It's one of those why don't you just situations. Somebody discovered the death database in the dodgy crew, and they said, well, why don't you just make them dead and ruin their lives, and their lives will become such a wreck that they'll self-deport, or they'll show up at an office to claim that they're not dead, at which time you can snatch them up and send them to El Salvador. Why don't you just? Well, it would be extremely illegal. Well, wouldn't we get pardoned? You have something there. So, as we said, that request soon morphed into the idea of just declaring people dead and see what happens. There's Leland Dudek. Leland Dudek, the acting commissioner.
Acting!
That's right. And by the way, how's he doing with his acting?
Acting!
He's
Brilliant! Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
oh, you're
Thank
welcome. He's really not doing a brilliant job at all, I would say, but he's doing a brilliant job at self-preservation anyway. But what did Dudek do here? The acting commissioner, who was elevated from a low-level position, wasn't low, but wasn't high up either, after displaying public loyalty to Dodgy, he traded that for some power, and guess what? He had qualms about the task, according to two people with knowledge of his thinking. He thought it was illegal, the people said, and it was. Then Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem intervened, and Dudek agreed to move forward. I don't know what she did, but maybe she offered him some hair curling services or something. On Monday, according to 4 people familiar with the matter, Dudek signed 2 memorandums. That would have been last Monday, I guess. 2 memorandums with Noem allowing the database action. Dudek declined to comment on the episode, but the next day, 6,100 mostly Hispanic names and their attached Social Security numbers were added to the death master file, according to records reviewed by the Post. The White House told the Post that roughly 6,000 immigrants all have links to either terrorist activity or criminal records, but we wonder whether their success rate on that is anything like the 10% success rate that still remains on the people that were shipped out to El Salvador before. 6,000 immigrants, all of a sudden they're all either terrorists or criminals. The official did not provide any evidence of the alleged crimes or of the terrorist ties, but said some of them are included on an FBI terror watch list, which may also be wrong or just might be a false accusation entirely. Not just that the false accusation of terrorism, but no, they don't actually appear on the list even. Who knows? You're not going to see that list. The immigrants added to the death database included a 13-year-old, a 14-year-old, and 2 16-year-olds, as well as one person in their 80s and a handful in their 70s, according to records obtained by the Post. Almost certainly, included incorrectly, if not in error, although you're talking about 6,000 names, one 13-year-old, one 14-year-old, 2 16-year-olds, and some people in their 80s and 70s. I don't know how many that is. It doesn't sound like a great deal of them, but, if it's just 6,100 names and you've got the computing power of the dodgy service on your side, shouldn't you really be able to straighten that out? Some agency staff have since checked the names and Social Security numbers of some of the youngest immigrants against the data that the agency typically uses to search for criminal history and found no evidence of crimes or any law enforcement interactions at all, staffers said. Among the people targeted were immigrants with valid Social Security numbers who had lost legal status, either for a reason or just randomly having it yanked by Marco Rubio, such as those who participated in Biden-era work programs that ended under the new administration, according to a White House official. Within Social Security, the General Counsel's office is preparing an opinion that will find the Trump administration's unprecedented use of the death database a violation of privacy law. Uh-oh. They're doing their job. Well, they'll probably lose their jobs very soon. That, according to one person with knowledge of the upcoming declaration, the opinion will take issue with the agency knowingly and falsely declaring that living people are dead. the person said. It's hard not to take that position, don't you think? On Friday of last week, a group of unions and an advocacy organization suing the Social Security Administration argued in a new court filing that the agency had violated a temporary restraining order, blocking dodgy from the agency's systems with personally identifiable information by adding their names to the deaths database. Isn't that something? Meanwhile, the effort to move immigrants who are alive into the deaths database is proceeding. On Thursday, Social Security added 102 more names, the records show. So how do you like that? On Friday, the people who are suing argued in a new filing that I got to get this again. I missed the import of this. Arguing that the agency had violated. Okay, so there's a temporary restraining order in place blocking dodgy from the agency's systems that would contain personally identifiable information. And if they were adding people to the deaths database based on that personally identifiable information, they must be violating a temporary restraining order in order to do so. It's just one more example of them just ignoring court orders. All right, but overall, a scary thing and subject to abuse, and actually interesting. They didn't even program their way around it. They found it as a vulnerability, and instead of closing it because they're technology geniuses, they said, what if we kept it open and exploited it for nefarious reasons? Just seems, kind of interesting. All right, let's see. Other stories that we might be able to squeeze in here for you. Gosh, there's a lot. And I guess, this must be the Politico article previously referenced. Inside the dodgy immigration task force, which we didn't even realize was part of their mission originally, but I guess has become part of their mission. This dates back to, it's not long ago, the 11th. Sophia Cai, C-A-I, the author of this piece, again in Politico. The task force, led by Musk confidant Antonio Gracias, is providing the technical infrastructure for a sweeping set of actions aimed at revoking parole and terminating visas. So I guess maybe this is step one in their 1-2 punch here. You revoke someone's work permit or visa, and then let them know that they are persona non grata and they should leave the country. And if it doesn't make the point well enough for you, we will also revoke their legal status with the Social Security Administration by declaring them dead. And it's not illegal to have died. It's just illegal for you to continue to work or collect any benefits in this country if you don't have a valid Social Security number. And you don't have one because we just said you don't. You don't have a visa, you don't have a work permit, and now we say you're dead. It's an interesting combination, to say the least. Okay, I don't know. There's probably no point in going on to any of the other stories, so perhaps we'll tell you a little bit about this one, just to fill in the blanks and to see how comprehensively they're working in different parts of the government here. Dodgy's bread and butter has been, they said, slashing headcounts. There's good to focus on slashing headcounts and not slashing budget, because they're not saving any money. That has not happened yet. Slashing headcounts, but now it is wielding its influence deep inside the nation's immigration system, an initiative led by one of Elon Musk's closest friends. 3 Trump administration officials granted anonymity have told Politico. Antonio Gracias, that's the name, a Musk confidant whose history with the billionaire goes back more than 20 years, is quietly heading up a specialized dodgy immigration force that's embedded engineers and staffers across nearly every nook of the Department of Homeland Security, 2 of the people said. The task force is also working with dodgy operatives stationed at other agencies like Social Security, of course, and the Department of Health and Human Services, which all house sensitive data on undocumented immigrants and even documented ones who then have had their documents revoked. With Musk's trusted friend and fixer at the helm, the task force marks a significant expansion of Dodgy's portfolio, from primarily working on agency-wide layoffs to executing the president's most hardline immigration policies. It's also a test for how far Dodgy's reach can extend Key dodgy engineers now embedded at DHS include Kyle Schutt, Edward Korstein, you remember him as Big Balls, of course. He must be loving that. And Mark Ellis, according to their government email addresses. At least two others. Aram, we've pronounced this name before, Mogadassi and Peyton Railing also have access to DHS data, as dodgy fingerprints are spread throughout DHS, including Customs and Border Protection, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, and Cybersecurity and Infrastructure and Security Agency. You remember that one? CISA, the ones who are in charge of, election integrity. Remember when that was supposed to be a big deal? Apparently, Korstein sitting at the top of tech on that one. Scary enough, but not for a little while will we really feel its effects, but we should be worried about it right now. They are providing the technical infrastructure for a sweeping set of actions aimed at revoking parole, terminating visas, and later on, re-engineering the asylum adjudication process, according to the officials. Their first mission, implement parole terminations for 6,300 undocumented immigrants who either have criminal records, they probably don't, or are on the FBI's terrorist watch list, which you can't see, and they probably aren't on either. That effort required coordinating with the Social Security Administration to have their Social Security numbers effectively canceled by adding them to that database who tracks dead people. We found out about that in the last 10 minutes. Their theory is that without effective Social Security numbers, which are needed for bank accounts and loans, among other things, people would then give up and self-deport. Last week, the plan was finalized in a high-level White House meeting with DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, Gracias, and other senior dodgy staffers and White House officials. In recent weeks, the Trump administration has moved aggressively in its effort to revoke parole, visas, and temporary protected status for hundreds of thousands of immigrants and students, many of whom were granted the ability to legally study and work in the United States in the short term under the Biden administration policies. And of course, anything Biden did has to be undone. Well, all right, a situation to keep an eye on, and Justice Putnam will help you keep an eye on it coming up next.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, here's what he's got on tap, or at least self-reported has got on tap. Canada. Thanks, Canada. Taking the lead to show the world how to destroy Donald Trump. I love it. What else? The man tapped by RFK Jr. to run the clinical trial to tie vaccines to autism. Previously convicted for practicing medicine without a license. Should be great. Stay tuned.